Hey guys, my name is Matsumo, and welcome to our episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. The first question for today comes from Tom, and it is, what do you think of a gadget for defense in Rainbow Six Siege that allows certain operators to reinforce from below? I've noticed that on certain maps, there are hatches on ceilings that are inaccessible for defense, such as Clubhouse. Well, that definitely would be a game changer. If Ubisoft introduced an operator that had the ability or a gadget to shoot a reinforcement. I realize how absurd that sounds, but if they had the ability to reinforce a hatch from below, that would make certain objectives on some maps way more appealing on defense. The example that you give, Clubhouse, is a prime illustration of this. Trying to defend Cash Room or the Master Bedroom can be a nightmare. This is the reason why you hardly ever see these objectives when you're playing on Ranked, because no one in their right mind would pick that over the other objectives because they're really challenging. Those objectives are very small to begin with, and if the enemy knows what they're doing, they're of course going to open up the hatches, which limits even further where you can hide to defend those rooms. And so if you had the ability or an operator that could reinforce those hatches from below, it would give you a lot more options. Sure, they could have a Hibana and a Thermite, which would directly counter you, but then the offensive team needs to make the decision. Do I take care of the hatches, or am I going to blow open a hole on the side of the bedroom to make our way into the objective that way? If all they have is one Thermite, they can open up two hatches or one hatch in the wall, and that'll at least leave one extra side that your team can reinforce or hide behind, so that hopefully you can secure and hold on to that objective. Now, the one small issue that I could think of with this idea is that Ubisoft might have a hard time convincing gamers that this gadget is in the realm of possibility. The normal reinforcements that we're placing on walls are giants. They're heavy, they're clunky, they're metal objects. How is some sort of gun or contraption gonna be able to launch this onto a hatch? And while at the end of the day, it probably doesn't even matter. Ubisoft can do whatever they want. It's their video game. We already have a bunch of operators that aren't that realistic, and so if they think that this type of gadget would benefit the game and make things more interesting, then they can go for it, but this is something that they would need to take into consideration. Now, what your question did get me thinking about, though, and I probably got a bit too excited about it, is what if they brought in an operator that could shoot some sort of contraption on an already reinforced hatch from below that would electrify it? That way, if a Hibana or a Thermite want to break open these hatches, and Hibana is really strong right now. Hibana is able to open up 3 different hatches. Like, she is a very potent operator on some objectives. To have a direct counter like this, where they would need to bring in a Thatcher to dispatch of that could also be a pretty big game changer. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, this sounds interesting, but why in the world would you ever want to play as Bandit anymore if this guy was introduced into the game? If this new operator is able to electrify a wall or a hatch at long range, they don't even need to be directly next to it, why play as Bandits? Well, an easy way of working around this is just have it so that this new guy's gadget has 2 charges and that's it. That way, Bandit still has his place, he's still going to be great for reinforcing walls, while this other guy is going to be more of a specialty for hatches. And so all in all, I think that these 2 concepts are a distinct possibility. I know I went on a bit of a tangent, we kind of elaborated and expanded upon your idea, but I would not be surprised if Ubisoft did something like this in the future. It would definitely change the game. I think this would have a fairly significant impact on some objectives, and I think the reason why I'm excited about it is that some objectives would become more viable, and we would finally see them in action when we play on certain maps. The next question comes from Charlie, and it is, what would you think of a new game mode incorporated into Rainbow Six Siege called Chaos, where destruction caused in each round remains the same and carries over into the next, meaning each round becomes increasingly difficult to attack as well as defend? Well, I can definitely agree with you that it would be chaotic. You got that right. It would be pure madness, but the reason why I'm not 100% sold on the idea is that how in the world are you going to be able to defend the objective by the 3rd or the 4th round? If every single wall is destroyed, you can't reinforce anything. You got nowhere to hide, and so while it is going to be still challenging for the offensive team, it's not going to be a free win because they still need to get the kills, but if the objective is wide out in the open and they can see everything going around because all of the walls are destroyed, that is going to be very, very hard for the defensive team to win. And so I think the only way that we would see something like this added into Siege is if Ubisoft wanted to bring in kind of a brawl mode like they have over in Overwatch. If you guys don't play Overwatch, every couple of weeks they bring in new game modes, they kind of change things up, they slightly tweak the way that the game performs, and it's just a kind of a fun arcade experience. And so if they wanted to have something like that into Siege, I know some of you are probably like, no, 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 and we'll get to that here in a second, this Chaos mode could fit quite nicely in there. They could also add something like recruit only, or they could bring in a game mode one week where offense and defense are switched, like the roles are entirely in Switch, and now you can play as Tachanka on offense. Like that is something that they could bring on over into the game. Now, the issues with this, of course, though, is that I know that there are some players out there that would never want to have this added into Siege. It distracts from what Siege is all about, which is that tactical first-person shooter, and they want nothing like this added into the game. The other reason is that this does split up the community. We've talked about this in the past, so we're not going to go into excruciating details, but if you're someone who is already annoyed by the long queue times, this would just exacerbate the problem. And while this last point may not be that big of a deal in the future, Ubisoft has talked about how the game is growing every single day. Every time a new DLC comes out, the player base jumps and they maintain that player base. And so in a year, we may have a healthy enough player count to not have long queue times and have 3 different modes like this. But that is something that they would also have to worry about. And so let me know what you guys think about this idea. Would you like to have a game mode like Chaos or a brawl mode where they change things every couple of weeks? Do you think that's the worst idea and you would never want to have that added into Siege? Let me know down below. The next question comes from Hayden, and it is, what do you think about a training session for new operators when they come out so that you can get a feel for them before actually paying the full 25,000 renown? That is not a bad idea. The longer this game is out, the more operators that we're getting, and while originally I didn't think it was that big of a deal, if you're someone new to this game and you don't have the money to spend on the season pass, trying to buy all of these operators is going to be a monumental task. At this point, if you're brand new and you want access to all of the new operators, you're gonna have to grind out 250,000 renown. We're not even done with year 2. We're not even halfway there. If they bring in a year 3, it's just gonna get even more absurd. And so I'm right there with you. I think there absolutely needs to be an option in the game where we can take these operators for a spin. Maybe you can have a trial version for, 2 hours or something like that, in-game 2 hours, that you can play with these operators just so you know if you're gonna wanna buy them. And while I realize that Ubisoft may not be 100% on board with this concept, at the end of the day, they are a business. They wanna make money, and so they would like you to spend money on these operators, either just to buy them outright or to buy the season pass. If you have the option to play around with these guys for a couple of hours to get a feel of which ones you like and which ones you don't like, well, you may not purchase that one that you weren't too fond of anymore, which could be a loss in sale. From a consumer standpoint, this is fantastic. I cannot tell you how often I get these questions. Like, some people are wondering, should they drop the renown of the year 1 operators? Like, that's something else that they could do, because someone who's new, and we got a lot of new players, as we mentioned even earlier, a lot of new people are joining into Siege, and to see this mountain of renown that they have to unlock or have to achieve to even have access to these operators is very daunting, and to have a way to at least slightly work around that, I think would be a great direction. The next question comes from Jeremy, and it is, what if there was an option in Siege to where when the game starts, the operators you choose will have little conversations like in Overwatch? What is your opinion on this? Now, I realize that many people probably wouldn't care one way or the other, but I would love if Ubisoft went the extra mile and did something like this for Rainbow Six Siege. I think the reason why Overwatch is as successful as it is, and I know that there's many reasons why, but I think the reasons why a lot of people have latched onto that game is because of their characters. They're relatable. They have a personality. Like, they have conversations. They've got witty banter back and forth, and if they brought that into Siege, I think that would be amazing. I want to know what operators are friends, which ones are enemies, who's the snarky one, who's going to have the witty banter back and forth, who's the lazy one. And while I know that we have been getting a bit of this, Echo is a really good example. Every time he uses his gadget, you can clearly tell he's more laid back, he's a bit lazy, and he wants his drone to do everything. I love that about him because it does give him some character. We get some backstory other than just trying to read through his profile. At the end of the day, though, I realize realize this probably is never going to happen. First of all, they'd have to rehire all of the old voice actors. They might be on other projects, so that may not even work. They would, of course, have to spend a lot of money on the development of this. You'd have to have good writers. Like, all of this would require money, and it doesn't really make for that much better of an experience. I mean, at the end of the day, people are buying this not because of the operators. I mean, it could bring in more of an audience if there was something that people could latch onto. Once again, I think this is the reason why Overwatch is so successful, is that people love the characters, and so that's how they got involved in the game. That could happen in Rainbow Six Siege, but all in all, this would require a lot of money. It doesn't really impact all the game, and so while I love the idea, I just don't see this happening at least anytime in the near future. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about what we discussed in today's video. Do you love the idea of being able to try out the operators before you buy? You think that's a great idea? Do you like the idea of having someone who can reinforce hatches from below? Let me know down below in the comments. As always, if you would like to submit your own question for an upcoming episode, you can leave a comment or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.